In some way, I said before, the titles, the numbers, I mean, are there. So people probably know that, but the way that I would like to be remembered more is like a good person from a small village in Mallorca that.
Welcome to our deep dive, everyone. Today we're taking a close look at the career of, well, a tennis legend.
Yeah.
Rafael Nadal just announced his retirement, and you guys sent over some really fascinating articles about him.
Yeah, his career is amazing.
So let's dive in. What made him such a force on the court? We've got it all here, from his early days all the way to those epic rivalries.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, everything that led up to his retirement from professional tennis. By the end of this, well, you're going to understand way more than just the headlines.
Yeah.
You're going to understand Nadal's impact on the sport.
And it's not just about talent with Nadal. It's about, well, almost superhuman grit and an ability to overcome any setback that came his way.
Right.
Really incredible.
So let's go all the way back to his childhood. I mean, one article mentions that he was picking up a tennis racket at 3 years old. 3 years old. And then turning pro at 15, winning the Davis Cup at 18. It's almost like, it was destiny.
It really does seem that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
What gets me is that even as a teenager, he was, already beating big-name players. I mean, think about it. He was 17, right? And he takes down guys like Carol Cucera and Albert Costa at the Monte Carlo Masters. That's not just talent. That's a statement.
Yeah. Wow.
He was making a statement for sure.
It really does seem like those early wins, they, set the tone for his whole career. I mean, there's this story, right? He beats Carlos Moya in, only his third tournament.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that.
And Moya was a former world #1. I mean, no wonder everyone was calling him a prodigy.
Absolutely. And then there's Wimbledon, right?
Right.
Reaching the third round at Wimbledon at 17, that's not typical, for a young player. Especially on grass, which can be a tricky surface to get used to.
Totally.
This time, yeah.
Okay, so we can't talk about Nadal without talking about clay courts.
Yeah.
King of clay. 14 French Open titles. I mean, come on. That's got to be some kind of record.
It's mind-blowing.
So help us understand this. What is it about clay that made him so dominant?
So clay courts are unique, right?
Right.
They're slower than hard courts or grass. The ball bounces higher, and the rallies, well, they last longer. So yeah, it's physically demanding, for sure.
Okay.
And it rewards players who can combine power with stamina and tactical thinking, Nadal's game was, well, basically tailor-made for it.
So it's not just about hitting the ball hard. It's about, outsmarting your opponent.
Yeah, exactly. And you got to outlast them, too.
Right, right.
His signature topspin forehand becomes even more deadly on clay. That high bounce just forces his opponents to hit all these awkward shots, gives him the advantage.
Oh, interesting.
Plus, Nadal just never gives up on a point. Mentally, he just wore his opponents down.
Wow.
It's like he was in their heads,
Right, right.
Just relentless.
There's one article, I think, that mentions that he had a record-breaking 81-match winning streak on clay.
I think you're right, yeah.
It took Roger Federer in the 2007 Hamburg final to finally end that run, which, of course, brings us to, the legendary Nadal-Federer rivalry.
It's got to be one of the greatest rivalries in sports history,
Absolutely.
Two titans just constantly, pushing each other, raising the bar, some of the most incredible matches we've ever seen.
Like that 2008 Wimbledon final. 5 sets, almost 5 hours, even got delayed by rain. I mean, that sounds like a movie, not a tennis match.
Oh, it was epic. And for those who maybe aren't as familiar with how tennis scoring works, a 5-set match, well, that's like the ultimate test. Endurance, mental strength, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Nadal won that day, but both of them, they left it all out on the court. People still talk about that match. Amazing.
Wow. I bet.
Yeah. And that Wimbledon win, well, it was a huge step for Nadal toward achieving what's called a career Grand Slam.
Right. He's one of the few players to win all 4 major tournaments. We're talking the Australian Open, French Open, Wimbledon, and the U.S. Open. It's like the ultimate achievement in tennis, right?
It really is. And Nadal didn't just win them, he dominated, especially at the French where, he basically became the king of clay. But what makes his career Grand Slam even more impressive is that he did it so young, like 24 years old.
That's crazy. I mean, To reach that level so early in your career
And
must have been a lot of pressure.
oh, tons. And then you got to factor in the injuries too.
Right.
Tennis is hard on the body. And Nadal, I mean, he had more than his fair share of battles, especially later in his career.
Yeah, these articles, they really highlight his resilience. I mean, knee problems, foot issues, wrist injuries. It's amazing how he always bounced back.
It really is. There's this one story about how he had to withdraw from the 2016 French Open, right?
Oh, wow.
Because of a wrist injury.
Yeah.
Can you imagine having to pull out of the tournament you've dominated like 9 times already? But even then, he didn't let it get him down. He came back the next year and won again.
It's that never give up attitude. That's what I find so inspiring about him. These incredible highs, winning those Grand Slams, but also having to overcome so much adversity.
It's true. And that fighting spirit, well, that's part of what made him so exciting to watch. Even when he was down, you never counted him out. He could always dig deep and find that extra gear.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we know about the injuries throughout his career, but it seems like in recent years they became, I don't know, more frequent, more serious.
Sadly, yeah. Even the strongest bodies, they start to wear down eventually. And in Nadal's case, that intense physical style of play probably took a toll, more than someone with a less aggressive approach.
Yeah. And it's heartbreaking to think that his body is what's forcing him to retire. He said in one statement, "I don't think I can play without limitations." Sounds like he can't compete at the level he expects from himself.
It's tough. You can just hear the emotion in his voice when he talks about it. For a guy who's known for his warrior spirit, to admit that his body isn't cooperating, that's got to be hard.
It really does.
Yeah.
One article mentioned how he had to pull out of this year's Australian Open because of a hip injury. And then he missed Wimbledon, too. That must have been tough, knowing each one could be his last.
Absolutely. And it's not just missing tournaments, it's missing the chance to add to his legacy. But even with the setbacks, he still had some incredible moments later in his career.
That's true. It's easy to focus on the injuries and the missed tournaments, but in 2022, at 36 years old, he won both the Australian Open and the French Open.
Wow.
I mean, that says a lot about his determination.
It really does. Those wins were like bookends to a tough period for him, He missed the 2020 U.S. Open because of the pandemic, then had to withdraw from the 2023 Australian Open because of his hip. To come back from all that and win like he did in 2022, it's incredible.
Makes his retirement bittersweet,
Yeah.
celebrating this amazing career. But it's hard not to feel sad knowing we won't see him play anymore.
It's the end of an era for sure. Nadal, Federer, Djokovic, they dominated men's tennis for so long. Now with Federer and Nadal retired, it feels like a big change. But of course, every ending is a new beginning too.
Yeah, right. What do you think the future holds for tennis now?
That's the big question. There are some really talented young players coming up like Alcaraz, Rune, Sinner. But can they reach that same level, that same rivalry we saw? Only time will tell.
Speaking of the rivalry, I read that Federer said, "What a career, Rafa. I didn't want this day to come." Even in retirement, there's so much respect between them.
Yeah, they pushed each other to be better, and they both knew it. Their rivalry wasn't just about winning, it was about pushing the limits and inspiring fans.
It's true. And it's not just about the rivalries either. Nadal inspired so many people with his work ethic, his humility, his passion for the game.
He's been a true ambassador for tennis, both on and off the court.
So as we look back on his career, it's clear his legacy goes beyond just the trophies and records.
It really does. He's shown us what's possible with dedication, resilience, and a never-give-up attitude.
What do you think people will remember most about him? The forehand, the fist pump, his dominance on clay? Or will it be something more, like his fighting spirit or his sportsmanship?
It's probably a combination of all those things, He's left a lasting impact on the sport, one that'll be felt for years to come.
Well said. Now, as we get to the end of our deep dive, I want to shift gears for a minute. One of the articles mentioned that Nadal was actually a talented football player as a kid.
That's right, yeah. He was good at both, tennis and football. For a while, it wasn't clear which he would choose.
Makes you wonder, what if he had chosen football? Would we be talking about Rafael Nadal, the football star?
It's interesting to think about, isn't it? But I guess fate had other plans.
His uncle, Tony Nadal, introduced him to tennis at a young age and became his coach, mentor, really his guiding force throughout his career.
That relationship is something special. Tony taught him so much, that strong work ethic, the never-give-up attitude, respect for the game.
It's clear Tony had a huge impact on shaping him into the champion he became.
Without a doubt. And their story reminds us that behind every great athlete, there's a team that helped them get there.
And before we wrap up, let's go back to Nadal's impact on tennis. Now that both he and Federer are retired, who do you think will step up? Who's going to capture the hearts of fans around the world?
Well, that's the tough question, isn't it? I mean, there are some really talented young guys out there. Alcaraz, Rune, Sinner. They've got the skills, but will they be able to reach that same level of, I don't know, dominance? That rivalry that we saw, it's hard to say.
It really is. It's like we're, passing the torch.
Yeah.
But it's hard to picture anyone matching Nadal on clay. 14 French Open titles. It's just wow.
Yeah. It'll be a long time before we see anything like that again, that's for sure. Maybe that's what makes Nadal's legacy so special, right? He set the standard that's, well, almost impossible to reach.
Makes you appreciate those moments when an athlete, becomes something bigger, something more than just like their sport.
Exactly. Nadal's intensity, that fighting spirit, his sportsmanship, those are things that go way beyond the tennis court.
Yeah, you're right. One article said that Nadal's absence, it won't just be felt on the court, it'll be felt by fans all over the world.
He had a way of connecting with people, emotionally. The fist pump, the look in his eyes during a match, the way he never gave up, those images, they'll stay with us.
Yeah, they will. He gave us a lot of unforgettable moments, that's for sure. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the career of Rafael Nadal. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure. It's always inspiring to look back at the career of someone who's achieved so much and, someone who's had such a positive impact on the world.
Absolutely. Before we go, one last thought. Now that both Nadal and Federer are retired, what do you think is next for tennis? What are you looking forward to seeing? And what questions do you still have?